What's up guys, welcome to another video, and today we're gonna build a trivia game together. Before we start, let me give you guys a preview on how this works. Here's the game. We can click to start the game. Once we do that, we have a 30-second timer before we can answer to this question. Again, this is our question and this is the list of the option. One cool thing here is the ability for you to see how many remaining questions there are. For example, after this question, there are 2 more questions remaining. If I select this one, what is my full name? I'm going to select the right answer, and you can see here I have this 3 seconds congratulations moment of tell me that I got the right answer. What is your favorite sport? If I get this wrong, you can see here I have a noted 3-second message that's telling me either or not I got this wrong. And again, they saying that all right, we know after this question we no longer have any more questions remaining. And if I select the right one, I can see here I have a noted congratulations message congratulating me. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the display result of what happened. I got 2 questions right. I missed one of them that I got wrong of a total of 3 questions, and I have the option of either resetting the game or not. Before we start, we do require you to have at least some basic understanding of JavaScript. If you haven't touched JavaScript before, then this entire section is definitely not for you. If you have, then feel free to come. We're going to do the best that we can to kind of walk you through every single step. If we miss something, please leave a comment below and other folks from the community will be able to help out. This is the game that we're going to build together. Without any further ado, let's get our hands dirty. First thing first, let's open our terminal, navigate to wherever you have your desktop. I'm inside my desktop. I'm going to create a folder called Trivia Game. And once I create this folder called Trivia Game, I'm going to go inside this folder. I'm going to cd inside this trivia folder, and once I'm inside of it, you need to open this into your code editor or IDE, whatever you have. I'm going to run this command that will allow me to open this one inside VS Code. Now, if you don't have this set up, feel free to manually go into VS Code and open it however you want to. You can feel free to go over File and go over Open and navigate wherever this folder is, which is inside your desktop. Find it, you can click on it and then click select to open that if you don't have that shortcut. Once I open this inside my VS Code, I'm going to create a couple of things. First thing I need to do is I'm going to create a file called index.html. I'm going to create another folder called asset, and within that asset, I'm going to create a couple folder inside that assets. Number one is I'm going to create something called JS, and inside that JS, I'm going to create 2 JavaScript files. One of them called app.js. This is where our main logic going to be. And lastly, but not least, is going to be a question.js. And question.js is going to be the one that contains the least of our questions that we have. And then the CSS file is technically going to be a style.css inside the CSS folder. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, this is my entire folder structure. Again, let's kind of quickly review it. We have an index.html in the root folder. We have an asset, the asset folder. Within that asset, we have 2 folders, one called CSS folder and another one called JS folder. And inside of each of them, we have the JavaScript folder that contains the app.js file, question.js, and also we have that CSS file that contains the CSS file ready to go. Now inside my index.js, I'm going to go ahead and use a shortcut. I'm going to use a shortcut exclamation point and hit tab, and that will autocomplete this for me. And boom, I have something like this, and I could say welcome to my trivia game, and I can add a very simple paragraph just to kind of illustrate this point. And ladies and gentlemen, that should be it. Now if I open this into the browser, right click and open that, there you go. Have something very basic, nothing inside of it yet. I'm gonna right click inspect. I need to navigate wherever I have the console, and the whole reason I'm doing this is before I do anything crazy, I want to make sure that I can properly link my CSS file and also my JavaScript file. All right, so where is my JavaScript file? My JavaScript file is inside a folder called asset and inside a folder called JS. I'm gonna make sure that I can properly link them together. So I'm gonna do this, that assets, and inside asset, I'm gonna go into CSS and get the style on the style file here. Now to make sure this works, I'm gonna go inside the style and I'm gonna select the body and I'm gonna get say background color red. I'm gonna give it a height of 100i just to make sure. Again, this is just a simple test to make sure that my CSS is properly linked. If I go back here, that should at least turn that into red, which means my CSS is properly linked with my HTML right here. Second thing I need to do is making sure that I can properly link all my JavaScript file. So I'm gonna export that. So again, go to assets and go to JS folder and bring the first thing I'm gonna bring is the question. And second thing I'm gonna bring is the app.js. Again, to make sure that they all work properly together, I'm gonna go inside the question and I'm gonna console log something very basic. I'm gonna say question. I'm gonna take the same thing and go over app.js and I'm gonna say app, something like this. So if I open this back into my browser, I should see a console log for the question and I should also see a console log for the app. And if I refresh the page again, there you go. Here's my question and here's my app. So technically both my CSS file and my JavaScript file are all properly imported. All right, so once this is properly imported, I'm gonna go ahead and use jQuery and Bootstrap. So let me get the Bootstrap link first. So go over wherever you have get Bootstrap. I'm gonna type get Bootstrap and click enter. And I'm gonna click on the first URL that I got. And once I get that, I'm gonna click on get started. And once I click that, I'm gonna get the CSS link. So I'm gonna go here and click copy. Once I copy it, I'm gonna go back to my index.html and I'm gonna add that Bootstrap link before my CSS file. Again, I added before just in case I want to overwrite something into it. Again, this is me importing the CSS of Bootstrap. To validate that the Bootstrap has successfully imported correctly, I'm going to add a Bootstrap class that I know of, btn primary, and that should turn the button to blue. This is a way for me to validate that the Bootstrap link has successfully imported. And if I go back here, refresh this page, and ladies and gentlemen, this Bootstrap has successfully imported. Lastly but not least, I need to go again and search for jQuery CDN. Click on the first link you see, and I'm gonna select on, there's different version here. There's version 3, version 2. I'm gonna pick the version 3 and up and click on the minified version. Again, this is important. You need to click on the minified version. And once you click on that, I need to copy this. If this doesn't work, I usually go ahead here and right click and copy that. And after I copy it and then go all the way on the bottom, now make sure that you import it before your ToScript here. This is important, okay? Before you ToScript here, make sure that you import jQuery first. And ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, this is the jQuery link and the Bootstrap CDN link that I just imported, and that should be completed. Now, to validate that the jQuery link has successfully imported, I need to go inside the app.js, and instead of console log just app, I'm gonna just console log $, the $sign here. Now, if it said $sign is undefined, that means that the CDN of jQuery did not properly import it. However, if it console logs something different, that means that the jQuery has successfully imported. So let's take a look. If I refresh this, and there you go, ladies and gentlemen, that means that my jQuery link has successfully imported into my page. All right, so now that we have everything that we need figured out, let's go back inside the index.js. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this dummy HTML for now, okay? So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna do a couple class. So I'm gonna set this one to be as a container. And then inside that container, I'm gonna have a jumbo chart class. And what that going to do for me is it's going to give me this big section where I can kind of like display. I'll show you how that looks in a second here. And if I save that, go back to the page, this is what I was referring to, this big gray section. And after that, I'm going to have my button right after that that said start game. I'm going to add that class here, btn. Okay, so and if I go here, you guys can see here, there you go, I have my Jumbotron out of the way. Lastly but not least, the next thing that I need to do after the Jumbotron section, I'm going to create two elements. Number one is going to be an H2 tag that has an ID of time. And this is where I'm going to be putting the 30 seconds timer that will go to the next question if that goes to 0. Second, I'm going to set a div that has the game ID, and this is where I'm going to be putting everything for my game, including the questions, the choices, everything for my game is going to be there ready to go. Now again, if we go here and try to load that, nothing gonna happen because we don't have anything inside of them yet. But remember, this one is going to be for my timer. And this is what I'm going to try with JavaScript to try to manipulate everything and dump everything here inside this div that has that ID of game. So that should be everything that I need to do inside my index.html. Quickly, let's review. We have our CDN for Bootstrap, and we have the jQuery CDN that we imported. We also imported the 2 JavaScript file, and we also bring the CSS file that we had here, and then we go ahead and code these simple things out for our HTML, and we should be ready to go. All right, so once we have that out of the way, I'm going to go over this question section, and instead of console login, I'm going to create a variable here. I'm going to call this one quiz or question, and this is where I'm going to create an array that's going to contain a list of all my questions. This one's going to be an object that has the question here. That's going to be the question that I have, and then this one's going to have the choices, which means it's going to be an array that's going to contain all the choices of that question. I'm going to also have something here that's a correct answer, and what that means is if this one has choices 1, 2, 3, 4, I can choose the correct answer to be 4, and so on. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how the format of my question is going to be. I'm going to go here and fill this with actual normal questions, dummy question that we can use throughout this code to test this out. There we go, guys. We have 3 simple questions right now. The first question that we have is, what is your full name? And we have a list of choices here. The first one we have is Sterling Axime. We have Sterling just by itself, Axime, Sadrak, and so on. That list can go on, and now we choose the correct answer to match exactly whatever is in the choice. One thing I'd like to call out here, which is important, you need to make sure that the exact spelling is the same as the current answer. And the whole reason is our logic is going to be based on the exact format, exact lowercase as the correct answer that you want to choose from. And the second question we have is, what is your favorite sport? And we have multiple choices here: baseball, football, swimming, and so on. And the right answer is equal to soccer. Again, make sure that they are lowercase, otherwise our logic will not work unless we do some further details logic to resolve this case. All right, so again, ladies and gentlemen, this is all the question that we have. One thing I'd like to call out here, which is very, very important. Remember, I have this list of questions inside a JavaScript file called question.js. And if we take a look at our index.js, here's the JavaScript question.js. This is how we are importing it, okay? This is very, very important. Now, after we finish importing that JavaScript question.js, we have another file called app.js. Now, there's one thing which is super important here that I want to call out is this. Anything that is inside of question.js automatically becomes available inside the app.js. What does that mean? That means if I go inside the app.js and try to do console log something that is inside the question.js, here's the quiz question, and I'm trying to console log the quiz question that is inside of question.js inside the app.js. Again, everything that is inside the question here, the fact that we import it first, automatically becomes available inside the app.js. And if I try to load that, and here's the entire list of questions that I'm referring inside the app.js. Okay, so what I need to do now is this. I'm going to go inside the app.js. I'm going to start defining a couple initial value. And what that means is those are going to be the value that are going to be by default what they are. You're going to have something called counter that start at 30, and counter is going to be the timer that's going to go from 30 to all the way to 0. You're going to have something else called current question, and current question is going to be the one that's going to pull the first question from the array. And if this number go to 1, that's going to go from the second question. And if it goes to 2, that's going to go to the third question, and so on. Now, by default, it's going to grab the first question. I'm going to have something called score, and score is going to be how many questions the user has selected correctly. And loss is not really needed, but what this is going to do is this is going to be the one that every time the user select a wrong answer, this one is going to increment to tell the user how many questions they answer wrong. Lastly but not least, the value that we are going to have is going to be a timer, and this timer is going to be the one that holds the ID of our set interval, which means as we start the clock, there's going to be something that holds the value of that clock, so that whenever we want to reset that clock or either delete that clock, then we can refer to that value so that we'll have the ability to clear that clock, that timer, or set interval, whatever you guys want to call it. And there you guys go. These are the initial value that we're going to use to build this entire game. The first thing that I want to do as part of my pseudocode is I want the ability to display the question and the choices together in the browser, which means whenever they go to this, I want to be able to display the first question into here so that the user will have the ability to pick whatever question that they want to work with. How can we do that? Well, in order for me to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function that I call load question. And the idea behind this entire function is every single time that we call this function, I want this function to go ahead and pick the current question and load the question with the choices into the page. This is going to be the goal of this entire question. Now, first thing we need to do, we have this function now. We want the ability for us to get the current question. How can we do that? Remember, this entire question is holding into something called quiz question. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to select, all right, the quiz question. And to get the quiz question, if you guys remember, this value is going to be the value that will tell us the current question that we're on. Every time that we increment it by 1, it will go to the next question. So far, it hasn't been incremented by 1, which means the current question is going to be the first question. It is referring to the first question. So I need to do quiz question bracket question, and that's gonna pick the first question for us. And now we can actually get the actual question from this. And what that means is whatever the first question is, which is what is my full name, this is what we are getting by doing that question. So if we want to get the choices, we can do that choices as well to get the choices. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna do choices, and instead of this time, instead of question, we're gonna get choices. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how we get in the question, and this is how we get in the choices by using this value here to get the actual current question. In this case, it is referring to the first question, and so on and so on. All right, so once we have that, if you guys remember, inside our index.html, this ID of game, this is where we're going to be putting everything. So let's select that here. I'm going to select that ID here called game, and I'm going to be putting everything in here. Now, for those of you that are not aware of so far of what is let and const, this is just ES6 version, which means you could have used a var as the ES5, but I'm gonna go ahead and use let as the new ES6. And now again, here I could have done something like this. I could have concatenating a couple thing here, and here I'm gonna display the question using an h4 tag. And if I save that and go back to the page, I won't see anything because I haven't invoked this function. So I'm gonna invoke this function now, and if I go back to the page, and boom, ladies and gentlemen, this is our first question displayed into the page. Again, if you guys remember, this one was the one that is going to go to the next question. So if I increase it by 1, it will go back to the second question. And if I increase it by 2, it will go back to the third question, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so we're gonna set it by 0 for now, which is gonna go into the first question. Now this is again ES5. I'm gonna rewrite this in ES6 for it to be a better way. So I'm gonna use the backtick, and what that means is I can do this. I can do h4/h4, and now I can use this $ in parentheses, and I can put any variable that I want. In this case, I want to put the question inside of here. Again, this is just a shortcut of how I can put that question inside of there. And ladies and gentlemen, if I go back again and we load the page, I'm still seeing the same thing. Nothing changed except a better way of me writing this using the backtick. The other thing that I want to do is, if you guys remember, again, if I go here, there was the timer. I also want to display the timer as well whenever I'm loading the question. So I'm going to go here just above that. I'm going to select that timer, and I'm gonna go HTML, and the timer is going to be that counter that's gonna start from 30 and go all the way to 0. And if I go back into the page, and there you guys go, I have this 30 here. I just want to add a simple message that will display the timer, something like that, to have something clear, and boom, there we go, we have our timer here including the question. Now, the next thing that we have left is displaying the choices for the question. How can we do that? Now, what I'm going to do is to make things a little bit more dynamic. I'm going to create another function. I'm going to call it load choices. And what this function is going to take is it's going to take the choices that we pass in, and it's going to first have an initial value that's going to be a string. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop over every single choice starting at 0. We're going to start at 0, and we're going to stop at the length of the choices that are coming in. And what that means is how many choices that we're getting, we're gonna stop at that many choices that we want, and we want to go by one, not by two, just one by one to go over every single choices. What do we want to happen? Well, what we want to happen is, if you remember here, we have a result. What we're gonna do with this result is we're gonna keep adding some p tag into it. And what that means is, as we looping over every single choices, we're gonna keep adding every single p tag over and over. So if we have 4 p tag, we'll have 4 p tag being added over here, and after we add every single one of them as a string, we're gonna return that result. Now again, this might not make sense for now, but we're gonna see an example in clear detail in a second. I'm gonna use backtick here just to kind of make things a little bit nicer. And here I'm gonna first give this one a classes, because later on I'm gonna be using that class. I'm gonna give this one a class of choice. And second, I'm gonna give this one a data attribute called data answer, and this one is going to be the one that hold the actual value of every single choice. What that means is the data answer gonna contain every single value of every single choice. So I'm gonna do choices bracket I, and I'm gonna copy the same thing and display them as well. All right, this might sound crazy for now, guys, but bear with me, okay? The data answer is gonna hold the value of every single choices, and the whole reason that we're doing that is later on when we click on every single P, we can actually get this attribute and get this value, and then we can do our logic to check and see if the user had picked the right answer based into that attribute. Again, this might not make sense for now, but just bear with me. We're gonna see this one in action. All right, so once we have this entire function that's gonna be going ahead and keep adding a bunch of P, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna call this function and call it here, and we're gonna say this, and we're gonna pass it the choices array. And again, we call this function here. This function gonna take all the array of the choices that are coming in, and it's gonna loop over every single one of them. Let's see how it looks so far. And boom, ladies and gentlemen, this is how all my choices is looking so far, nice and clean. And again, if I keep trying my variable here, go to the next question, you can see here now it goes to the next question with all the choices. And if I go to number 2, the same thing over and over and over, it's working as expected. Okay, so next thing I'd like to do, so far we have the choices, and if I right click over every single one of them, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm on the first one, not the third one. So if I will load this again, I'm on the first one. Now, if you take a look at this here, here's what we were trying to do. You see, so choices, every single one of them has a class of choices, and every single one of them has a data attribute called data answer with the actual value of every single choices here. Okay, so what I need to do now is I'm gonna add some CSS here. So I'm gonna go to style, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the choices, and what I'm doing here, every single one of them that has this class, I'm gonna style them as follow. I'm gonna first give them a border 1 pixel solid light gray, and second I'm gonna give them a padding of 10 pixel, a border radius of 4 pixel, and a cursor pointer and a cursor as pointer. And if I will load this again, I have something that looks like this. I have this pointer cursor that I can hover over and pretend that I'm clicking on them even though I'm not yet clicking on them yet. So let's see what we have so far. Let's review everything, okay? So first thing first, we're getting the question, we're getting the choices, and what we do is first with the question, we are displaying the question, and then we have this function that we pass the choices, and this entire function, what it's doing is it's gonna go over every single choices and loop over them, and as it looping over them, it's setting the data answer to every single value and also displaying them into the page, and put every single P, keep keep adding them into that result, we turn that result so that that result can be displayed over here. So technically what's happening is this. Here's what's happening here, okay? So what's happening is instead of displaying them here, that's what's being displayed down there, so that you guys can have a better visual representation of what this function is doing here. And believe it or not, that was the display the question and choices to the browser. The next thing that I want to do is I want to start a 30-second timer for user to respond, to choose an answer for each question. So now I have that 30 default value, but it's not really a timer that's going from 30 to all the way 0. So what I really want to do is I want the ability for me to go and start this timer from 30 to keep going all the way to 0. So that's what we're going to try to do next. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to go back to wherever I have the load function. I'm going to do a couple of things here. First thing first, I want one thing to happen every single time that we call this function, and you guys will see why in the future why I'm doing it here. So I want everybody, whenever they call this function, I want the timer, display of the function, I want everything to happen here so that whoever called this function, the whole thing can happen here again and again. One thing I'd like to do is if the counter was at any value, I want to reset that value back to 30. This is just a way to make sure that we always calling this function with 30 initial value so that whatever value it was, it could be reset and then start the timer here. Now, if you remember this variable that we had before, this is when we're gonna start the timer with. So we're gonna go here and start the timer with that variable. So we're gonna say, all right, so timer, we're gonna set interval. And if you guys don't know what set interval is a JavaScript built-in function that allows you to work with time. And we're gonna put a function here called countdown. We don't have that function yet. We're gonna create it in a second, and then we're gonna have our timer go by 1000 millisecond, which evaluate to 1 second. We're gonna create this function here. So we're gonna create this function called countdown, and this is the function that's going to count down. Now every single time that it count down, I'm gonna take the counter, which is this counter that was 30, we're gonna keep decreasing it from 30, 29, 28, 27, and so on and so on. And every single time that we do that, we're going to take we're gonna select the timer here. We're gonna select the ID from the page, the index HTML here, which is that ID. So every time that it's going from 30, 29, 28, we're gonna select this element, which called timer, and then we technically gonna display whatever it was. So we technically gonna display whatever the new value is. So again, all I'm doing here is as this is going down and down, it's gonna display over and over. Now to illustrate this point, I'm gonna decrease this one to 5 just for us to see something that we can quickly test with. Okay, so let's see what happened. So if I reload this, and now it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, blah blah blah. It keep going down and down. Now this is one issue. We don't want this. We want it to stop right at 0. So what I'm gonna do here right after this, I'm gonna add a conditional logic. I'm gonna say, all right, if the counter, which is the one that's keep going down, if it's equal to 0, I'm gonna do something. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create an entire separate function so that I can have more granular control of how to do things within the other function. I'm gonna call this function time up, which is going to be the function that fire whenever it reaches 0. What do we want to happen? We want to clear the time. And again, one of the reasons we use this variable is for us, whenever we set that timer, we want a way to refer to it, which means if we can refer to it, we'll have the ability to clear that time. And that's how we use that timer again, that same variable here, to clear the time that it started. Again, whenever it reaches 0, we want to call this function, and this function is the one that's going to go ahead and clear the time when it reaches to 0. So let's take a quick look and see if that works. If I refresh the page again, 3, 2, 1, 0, and then it should stop right there. And ladies and gentlemen, this is working as expected. So far, everything is working good, everything looking nice. All right, so one thing we'd like to call out here, which is important, okay? So whenever that timer reaches out to 0, that means that the user hasn't selected anything yet, and which means also that the user had lost. So we're gonna go ahead and increment the loss count for that user. And once it reaches to 0, we want to do something else. We want it to go to the next question. And for that, I'm going to be creating a function here called next question. Okay, so here's going to be the function that's going to go to the next question. And how do we go from the next question? If you remember earlier, this entire variable is the one that goes to the next question. What does that mean? If I increase this one by 1, and now it's going to go to the next question. If I do it by 2, it goes to the next question, and so on. So how can we have this one go to the next question automatically? What I need to do is grab this variable and increment it by 1. Once that happens, I need to call the function that loads the questions. Again, after this was 0, it goes from 0 to 1. Then let's try to load the question again. And next time that it loads the question, it will find this value with 1. So all we need to do in this case is load the question. Load question, and boom, that should technically do it. But we haven't called this function yet. And we need to call this function after the time is up. So after the counter has reached to 0, then this is the function that fires when the counter reaches to 0, which means we need to call this one right here. So whenever it reaches to 0, it should go to the next question. Let's see if that works. So if I refresh this, boom, 0, and then it goes to the next question. You see that? Boom, 2, 0, and then it goes to the next question. Boom, 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 and it goes to the next question. Now we have one issue here. What happening is it's trying to go beyond the amount of question that we have. So far, we only have a total of 3 questions. Well, what's happening in our code here is trying to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more questions after the amount of question that we have. So how can we do that? What we need to do is we need a way to determine before we go to the next question, are we at the end at the last question. So we're going to write some logic to do this here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a logic here. We're going to check and say, is question over? So if the question, if we no longer have any more question, we don't want to go to the next question because we don't have any more question. And else, which means we still have some question, then that's when we want to go to the next question. Now, how can we do this logic to do that? First thing first, I'm going to store a variable that's going to do this. In order for us to do this logic, we need to bring the quiz question, which is the amount of question, that length, and we're going to minus it by 1. Again, we're going to take the amount of question, we minus it by 1, which is going to give us the index of the last question. And we're going to check and see if this one is equal to the current index, which means whatever index the last item of the entire question is, if it's equal to the current question index, then we know for sure that the question is over. We don't have any more question, and if we don't have any question, we technically can console log game is over, something like that, just for us to see that the game is over. But if we still have question, that's when we still want to go to the next question and keep going to the next question and so forth. All right, let's test this out and see if that worked. If I reload this, and this is the last question, boom, it stopped right there. And as you guys can see here, the game is over. It doesn't go to the next question. It stopped right there. It knows that we reached the end of the question by doing this logic here. This is the logic that tells us that it reaches the end of the last question. Please do not try to go to the next question because we don't have more questions. All right, guys, so what we just did is if the timer is over, go to the next question. This is exactly what we just finished completing. Before we go any further, let's quickly review what's going on here. Again, we have the load question function that is responsible to load the question. However, before it loads any question, it automatically starts the timer that will start counting down. As we start counting down, whenever it reaches to 0, then it knows that the time is up for that question. Then it will clear the timer and then consider this one as the user had lost because they did not select a question, and then it will try to go to the next question. Now, before it goes to the next question, it will check and see if we have any question for us to continue. If not, if not, then it technically console log game is over. If we still have more question, then it goes to the next question. This is where we at so far. The next thing that I want to do is this. Now, either correct or wrong choice selected, go to the next question. What does that mean? What I really want to happen this here is this. Whenever I click on any of these answer choices, when I click on them now, nothing happened. Again, if I click on any one of them, nothing happened. What I really want to happen here is this. Whenever I click on one of them, I want to check and see if the one that I click on has the correct answer. And if it does have the correct answer, that means the user wins. However, if it doesn't have the correct answer, that means the user lost. First thing first, we need a way to find out all that element, and whenever we clicked on them, we want the ability to do our check. First thing first, let's make sure that we can click on them. In order for me to do that, I'm going to use this $ right here. I'm going to do $document, and I'm going to do on, and this one I'm going to do click, and here I'm going to pass it the choice, the list, the attribute that they have. If I right click on this just to see what I'm doing here, here's the elements. All of them has a class of choices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, so whenever I click on any one of them that has the choice classes, then I'm going to try to console log something to make sure that this is working. So if I try that and refresh the page, go back to my console log, and let's verify is that working. You see, whoop, it is working. There you go. It is working as expected. Whichever one that I click on, it is working as expected here. Boom, boom. There we go. It is working again and again. What I really want to do here is this. I want to be able to find this attribute that they have, which is the attribute value here called data answer. That's what I want to get. What I want to do is I want to store a variable called selected answer. And to get this attribute, I need to do this. I need to do $this. And what that means is this represent every single element that we click on, okay? This again represent every element that we click on. In that case, every element that has the class of choice gonna be representing by doing the $this. And what I want to do once I click on every single element, I want to go inside that element and get the value of the data answer, and I'm gonna console log this for now just to see what I'm doing so that you guys can follow along. Again, all I'm doing is every time that I click on any element that has the class of choice, I want to go here and get the attribute value of the data answer. So let's try that out. If I refresh the page and go back, when I click on this one, it should return Sterling Axime, Sterling, baseball, football, swimming. It's getting the attribute value of every single element that I click on. Before I go any further, let's try to explain this. Some of you might be like, okay, Sterling, I don't think I've seen this before. Why do you need this? All right, let's try to use the old way and see what happened here, okay? So this is the typical way. First, you select the element, and then you listen into that particular event. But let's see if this works. If I refresh this, I click on this, nothing happened. And the question is, why nothing happened? Well, we're dealing with something in jQuery called event delegation. And what that means is any element that we're dynamically put in the DOM, we can't really listen to them by doing it this way. First, we have to listen to the entire DOM for any new element that comes to the DOM that has the classes of choice. And once we do that, any new value that automatically got injected into the document, which are those values, now we can listen to them. And that's one of the reasons that we have it this way to deal with the event delegation. Okay, so once we have the value of every single attribute, if you guys remember again in the question, there was something called correct answer. So what we need to do is we need to find, number one, the current question that we are, and we're going to check the current answer with the one that the user picked. If they are the same, then the user get the correct answer. Again, this is going to be the user choice right here. So, okay, so this one's going to be the user choice. So let's pick the correct answer from the question. So I'm going to do correct answer, and that's going to equal to quiz question. And if you guys remember, the way we have the current question is by using this value. So I'm going to decrease bracket current question, and I'm going to get the current answer. So here's the answer the user selected, and here's the current answer. So what I need to do here is I need to do a check. If current answer is equal to the selected answer, then that means the user win. User win. And if user win, that means we need to grab the score value, and we're going to keep incrementing that score by 1. So here's the score value that's going to keep a track of when the user wins. So we're going to increment this one by 1, and else that means the user didn't win. So we're going to increment the loss by 1 as well. So this one is in case the user win, and this one is in case the user did not win. And to illustrate this point, I'm just going to console log wins, and this one I'm just going to console log loss, just to visually see this so that we can continue and you guys can follow along here. All right, so let's see what's happening here. So when we go back, refresh this, if I select the wrong answer, you see I lost. And if I go ahead here after this one, if I click soccer, and I win. And if I wait until that one and then click Bichonville, I lost. But there's one thing here. Whenever the user win or lost, I want that user to automatically go to the next question, just like the same way with the timer. So if the timer reaches 0, I want the user to go to the next question. Now, in our case, we want the same thing to happen whenever the user get the wrong or the right answer. So in order to do that, if you guys remember, there was a function called next question. So all I need to do here, whenever the user win, we're going to call this next question right here. And whenever the user lost, we're also going to call this next question right there. And again, this is going to tell us or not either the user win, and whenever they win, we're just going to bring them to the next question. So let's take a quick look and see how this works. If I refresh the page again, if I click the first one, boom, I win, and it goes back to the first one. But we have one issue here. You see how the timer kind of like acting weird, and it goes beyond our threshold of if it reaches 0 or not? It is because there's still a timer that we didn't click. If you remember, whenever the time was up, where is it? The time up. Whenever the time was up, the first thing that we did is we clear the timer to make sure that there's no timer running before we can process with our logic. What we need to do in this case is whenever we click this button, it's gonna fire, it's gonna get wrong or right. What we can do in this case is we're gonna clear the timer as well so that there is no timer that is acting weird right here. So if we try that, that should work as expected. So if I click that, you see, so now the timer has been cleared and there's a new timer that starts. And if I select one again, and you can see here again, let me do that. Select the right answer, select something else, and the timer has been clear, and that is working as expected. All right, so far everything looking good. Next thing I want to do is this. Whenever the user reaches the last question, we want to show them a result of everything that they had selected. We want to show them, hey, you get this right, you missed this in total of that many questions, and we also want to show them a reset game button in case that they want to reset the game. Again, there's more thing that we need to do, but so far what we want to do in this case is we want to show them a summary of the game, of how many things they got right, how many things they got wrong, and so on. So in order for us to do that, we're going to create another function. We want to create a function called display result. Okay, display result, that's going to be the main job, is to display the entire result. And what we're going to do here is this. We're going to set this one as backtick. Again, if you remember the backtick, this is the ability for us to add more value that we want. And after that, we're going to select the game. If you guys remember, there was an element here called game. This is where we're going to be displaying everything. So we're going to select the game, and then we're going to HTML, which means we're going to put everything that's inside the result into that entire element. So what do we want to be inside the result? We want a couple element. Number one, we want a p tag, and this p tag is gonna be like you get whatever score that you had. For example, we're gonna say you got score questions, and then we can put right. So that's gonna be like, all right, so if you had 2 score, you can say you get 2 questions right. If you had 3 questions right, you got the idea, and so on. And then we're gonna go ahead and put the top of all the thing. And lastly, it's gonna be a button here, and that button is gonna be our reset button. So we can say reset game, and the other two I'm gonna say here is you miss And then this one, the one we were keeping track of how many times that they miss a question, is lost. You miss whatever question, and then that many question. And then we want to also display the total of question. We can say total question, and that's going to be equal to the quiz.length, which is going to represent the length of the entire question that we have. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, this is our entire function that we want. All we need to do is, when do we call it? Well, we want to call this function whenever the game is over. And when is the game is over? The game is over, if you guys remember, we had that game over here. So before we display the next question, we want to check and see if the game is over. So wherever we have here, we want to call it right there. So we want to call it wherever we are checking for when the game is over, then display this entire result. So let's take a look and see if that works. So now if I refresh this, and I'm gonna pick the first one, wrong answer, right answer, and boom, you see, I got 2 answer right, and I missed one of them out of a total of 2 questions. The only thing we have here is our button doesn't style the same one, so we're gonna fix that. Wherever we have the display result, where is it? Display result, this is where we have it. So we're gonna add a class into here, btn primary, and we're also gonna add an ID here called reset, just in case we want to select that one, because we're gonna add some functionality for us to reset that game. So if I click that back and go back again, select the right answer, soccer, I'm gonna select all of them right, and boom, I got 3 questions right. I missed 0 one of them out of a total of 3 questions. Now, if I click the reset, of course, it doesn't do anything. All right, so far, let's review before we go anything crazy. We only got a couple more functionality missing before we can wrap up this entire thing. But before we go, let's gonna review everything we got so far, okay? So we had our click event that's gonna click on any p element, any element that has the choice, and get this attribute called data answer, which contain the value of every single choices. Now it get that value that the user selected and get the current question correct answer, and check and see if the user get it correct. Now if the user get it correct, it increment the score value and then go to the next question. If the user get it wrong, it increment the loss value and also go to the next question. Now before it goes to the next question, it's gonna check and see if there is any more question to go over on. Okay, if the question is over, which means we don't have any more question, then it's gonna technically display the entire result. If we still have more question, then that's when it goes to the next question and load the question. Next thing up, what I want to do is this. Whenever I click on the reset game, I want the ability for me to reset the entire game, to start all over. That's what I want. In order for us to do that, we need to find a way to select this button. In order for us to do that, if I inspect this button has an ID called reset. So what I can do in this particular case is I can go all the way down here. I can say, all right, document. I'm going to do the same thing because that button is being generated dynamically. So I'm going to select the document. I'm going to say on, and I'm going to say click, and then select, click, and then select the button that has the ID of reset, and I'm gonna pass a function here, and there you go. So what do I want to happen? First thing first, let's make sure that we are at least clicking this button. So let's do testing and testing, and then refresh this entire page. So we should be seeing testing and testing whenever we click this button. So select, and now when we click it, you see I'm seeing testing, which means I'm targeting the right button. So what do we want to happen? Well, what we want to happen is this. We want to reset all the above value that we saw right here. So we're going to bring all these value right there and put them right here. So that's what we want to do. And in order to reset them, we want to remove the let to make sure that we can actually reset those values. So I'm going to go here and target those value and go ahead and reset them. The only difference is the timer. Now I'm going to set it to null, and after I reset those value, I'm going to load the first question. I'm going to load the question, which going to get the first question, because this value now going to be equal to 0, which going to match to the first question. And after that, I'm going to load the question, which technically should be starting at the first question. Let's see if that worked. So if I refresh this page, and now I got 2 questions right, and if I click this one, this should reset the entire game. And boom, ladies and gentlemen, I go back to the first question and I can go back again. Boom. I got missed 3 questions and I can reset it again. I'm gonna get all right. And there you go. I got 3 questions right and total of question. I can reset it over and over and over. So far, our trivia game is looking really good. The only 3 things that I have missing is the ability for me to display how many questions remaining. And second, I want also, whenever I got an answer right or whenever the time ran out, I want to display a 3-second image of congratulating the user. Either they get it wrong or making fun of them, they got it wrong or something. Whatever you guys want to do is going to be your trivia game. You can do whatever you want with it. But in my case particular, I want to show a funny image, either or not they get the answer right or wrong. And lastly but not least, we don't want the game to automatically start. We want the game to only start whenever we click this button. This is when we want the game to start. So we're gonna fix this one in a second after we get all the functionality ready to go. Before that, let's add that value here in order for us to know how many questions we have remaining. In order for me to do that, I'm gonna go ahead here and add a function. It doesn't really matter wherever you add your function, as long as you can call, you know where you're calling them. I'm gonna add a function called load remaining question. And here I'm gonna do the logic that can calculate the remaining question. Now it can be a little bit tricky because what we really need to do is we want the ability to calculate how many items we have into the array and where are we in terms of within that item. But there's one issue here because we calculate an item from the array from the index, which means we start from 0. What we want to do is we don't want to start from 0. We want to start from 1. So in order for us to do that, we need to add 1 at the current index. And what is the current index? If you guys remember again, this is the current index of the question wherever we are. This is the one that's telling us where we are. So what we need to do here is this. We want to say remaining question is gonna be the total of the entire question length, which is gonna be how many item is inside that entire stuff, minus the current question, which is where we are, plus 1. Now it's no longer gonna be an index starting at 0. It's gonna start at 1, and whenever we have that, that's gonna give us wherever we are within that question. And now we can have the total question here. And total question is equal to quiz.length, and that's the total question. And then we can return some sort of format remaining question, and that's gonna be the remaining one, which is gonna be the remaining question, and then slash the total question. To the total question. Now, once we have that, that should give us that particular format. Once we have that, all we need to do, make sure that I call remaining question. Once we have that, all I need to do is call this. Where do we want to call this? We want to call this one wherever we are loading the question. So here's where we are loading this entire question right here. So we want to call it right after the choices. So here's the choices. I'm gonna call it right here. So I'm gonna boom and boom, I load this one, and let's see how that works. So if I reload this one here, there we go. We have 2 other questions remaining after this one, and after this question I have 1 more question remaining, and then after this question I no longer have a question remaining. And check this out, if I add another question here, it will be automatically calculated as well. So if I add another question here, it knows that if I refresh it, it knows that I have 4 questions. I have 3 remaining after this one. So my logic is working as expected, and that should be completed. Again, this is the logic that does that, that will allow me to calculate how many questions that I have left. Lastly but not least, what we want to do is we want to display a funny Jiffy for correct or wrong answer. Now, if you don't know about the Jiffy website, feel free to head over to your Google, type Jiffy, click on the first link that you find, and now search for anything. I search for oops for the wrong answer for me, and I have a bunch of things that I can download. Feel free to pick whichever one. I just need a total of 6 picture, 3 from oops and 3 other ones from celebrate. And then feel free to pick whichever one that you want to pick from. Again, if you want to pick this one, for example, you need to click on it and then right click and save it as an image. Now I have an entire of 6 of them, so I'm going to copy the entire 6 of them here. So I'm going to right click and copy this. I'm going to copy this. Where's the copy? I'm going to copy and then go to desktop, and I'm going to go to wherever I have this trivia folder. There you go. And I'm going to go into assets, and I'm going to create another folder called images. And within that images, this is where I'm going to technically paste all of them in there. And again, if I go back into my code, now I have a folder called images, and this is where I have all the one that I have and so on. Now, one thing I'd like to do here is this. I'm going to go back to wherever I have the question.js. I'm going to create two other variable, one for fun images that's going to contain an array of the list of all the images that I have for fun. First thing first, I need to go to assets and /images, and then after that I need to select the images that I want to. For this one, I want to get for the fun one, I want to get the hell yeah that GIF and so on. You got the ideas. So here's the list of all the fun one that I have for the assets, and I'm gonna do the same thing for creating a variable called sad images, and it's gonna be a list of all the sad one. Again, you're gonna technically do the same thing as the fun one. You put all the sad one into this one, and there you go, guys. I have a total of two variable that contain all my fun images, and this one contain all my sad images. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back inside the app.js. Wherever you have the app.js, I'm going to go all the way down. It doesn't matter where you put this function. Now what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to write a function that called preload image, and what this is going to do is this is going to be the function that is responsible to preload the image after the user had get the correct or wrong answer to kind of display a funny image. And again, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the correct answer because I want to display the correct answer to tell the user, hey, this was the correct answer and you chose the wrong answer. Just something to kind of illustrate the user that they pick the wrong answer and what was the correct answer. So in order to get the correct question, I'm gonna do quiz, and again, that should be second nature by now, and quiz correct question, and then we're gonna get the correct answer, and this is the correct answer. Now there's one thing we want to do, because we want to display two different states for either the correct or wrong answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass something here called status, which means whenever I'm calling this function, I can pass a status of either win to display the win version, or I can pass it something like wrong to display the wrong version. So I just wanted to be dynamic for different state of when the user win or lost. So I'm gonna do an if logic here. I'm gonna say, all right, if status is equal to win, then do this. Now else, if the status is not equal to win, then do the following. So what do we want to display if the user win? If the user win, I want to first select the ID of the game. And if you guys remember, again, this was where we were dumping everything inside this div. So we're going to select this div, and then we're going to .html into that div, and we're going to use backtit to display a couple thing, and the couple thing that we want to display here is this is couple paragraph. This guy is gonna have a class of preload -images, and we're gonna say congratulations, you picked the correct answer, something like that. And then we can also add another p tag just to kind of display something like the correct answer is, and then we can display the correct answer for that particular user, even though that he got the correct answer. So this one is the one whenever they win. Okay, so for this, I'm gonna hold into that for now, and I'm gonna copy the same thing over and paste it over for when they lost. For when they lost, the message is gonna change. We're gonna say the correct answer was, and whatever the correct answer was. And we can display a funny message like you lost pretty bad, something like that. Here's our preload message for now. Again, we still haven't had the image yet, okay? So what we have so far is just a message to display the user that this is what happened when they lose or win. But how can we display this message 3 seconds before the next questions come? How can we do that? Well, in order for us to do that, we're gonna take this function. Here's the function called preload. And And wherever the user win, this is where the user win inside this function right here. So wherever the user win, before we display the next question, we're going to call this function here. This one is going to be for win. This one is going to be for win, and we're going to call this function right there too for loss, or we can call it wrong. We'll call it loss. And the same thing wherever we have the next question, and here's where we have the next question again. Before we display the next question, we're going to display this one as well. We're going to call this one loss. Okay, but now there's something here. If I try this out, let's see if it works. It should be waiting 3 seconds before it display the next question. Let's see if that worked. If I reload that and select the right answer, you see nothing happened. Nothing at all happened. And again, the message did not even show at all. So what we need to do is, before we display the next question, here's the next question. Before we display the next question, we want to set a timeout, and that timeout gonna display the next question, but it's gonna display the next question 3 seconds after, so that this can already preview, and after it has preview, then the next question can come in. So wherever we have the next question, we're gonna wait 3 seconds before we display them. So I'm going to do the same thing for here. So I'm going to set a timeout, and that timeout is going to display the next question. The only difference is going to wait 3 seconds before it displays the next question right here. This is what we do. Now let's take a look and see if that worked. If I will load the page and select the right answer, you see it displayed the message, and then 3 seconds later, then it displayed the next question. And if I do that again, the same thing is happening over and over. Now, one thing I'd like to check to fix here, if I select the right answer, I want the correct answer to be in bold so that the user can easily see what the correct answer was. So wherever we have the preload images, which is the one that's preloading before the next question happen, we want to select that, and then we're gonna put it before a tag called B, and this is just a way of bolding the correct answer here. Okay, boom. And if we try that again, and if I click that one, you see the correct answer is now bold, which is the correct answer, and fake answer, it's showing the correct answer, and over. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we almost done, but we haven't displayed the image yet. What we want to do is we have the messages that is displaying before the next question. What we want to do is we want a way to create a random image. In order for me to do that, I'm going to create a function that is responsible to give me a random image. Okay, and once I have that random image, I can do further thing with it. Okay, so what I want to do is this. I want to display an image right here inside here, and this has to be a random image next after the message. In order for me to do that, I just need a random image URL. How can I do that? So remember, we had two different images. We had a fun one, we have a sad one. We want a way to dynamically generate a random one for the fun one or a random one for the sad one. All we need to worry about is the array that we're passing. So in order for us to do that, we're gonna take our function, we're gonna pass it an array, and what we're gonna do is this. We're gonna say, all right, this one's gonna be the random number. That's gonna give us a random number for that particular length of the array, and we're gonna round that number. We're gonna say math.floor, math.random, and we're gonna multiply by the length of the array that's coming in, which is whatever array that's coming in here. So what that means is, if we do this, we pass it the font image, then that's gonna go all the way to the length of that font image. If we pass it the side image, it's gonna go all the way to the end of that side image. So once we have that random number, we can now have the random image. In order to get the random image, it's gonna be the image that'll coming in, and pass it that random value, and now we can return that random image right here, and boom. I think that should be it. And now all we need to do is call this function right here. And we're gonna call this function right here with this one was for the win one. If the user wins, then we're gonna pass it the list of the fun image for it to select from. And then if the user lost, we're gonna pass it the list of the sad image in order for that user to select from. So that's gonna be random image, sorry. And then we pass it that value right here. And now let's see if that works. If I refresh this one, click select one, oops, we got an error. The image did not work. Let's see what happens. So if I go back into the questions, oops, I think I need to remove wherever I have that slash. So I need to remove one dot. So I add too many dots. So let's remove one of them, save that, and then go back again, refresh the page. And now if I select the right answer, if I pick this one, boom, there you go, guys. I picked the right answer. How about that? And click the wrong answer, boom, I got something that tells me this is working as expected. All right, guys, we almost done. The only thing we have is the ability to not have the game start out of the box. We want the game to start only when we click this button, okay? So when we click this button, that's the only time that we want the game to start. So how can we do that? Wherever we had that button, if you guys remember this button here, this is the button that's starting the game. So we can give this one an ID for us to be able to easily select that. We're going to give it an ID called start. And what I'm going to do is wherever we have inside the JavaScript file, I'm going to now select that ID called start, the button called start. I'm going to say, all right, when I click on this button here, I'm going to do this following. So whenever I click on this button, I want a couple of things to happen. Number one is I want the ability to remove that element because I don't want to see that button anymore. Once I click on it, I want it to be gone. Second thing, I want to show the timer. So wherever you had that timer, I want to display that timer to show that, hey, we had like 30 seconds remaining, whatever the counter was. And third but not least, we want to load the question. And whenever we load the question, it's going to start with whichever question, with the first question that it start with. And I believe that should do it. And we no longer need to run this function here because we don't want this function to happen when the page loads. Okay, so we're going to remove this one here. And that's when we want the game to start whenever we click the start button. So let's take a look and see if that works. Refresh the page and boom, the game did not start. When we click the start button, it's going to go away. And now the game starts indeed. And you see, it's working as expected. And lastly but not least, one thing that we can do is increase the counter. Now wherever we have the counter, we want to make sure that it's 30 seconds. So we're gonna search for counter. Now it's gonna equal to 30 seconds instead of 5 seconds. 30 second counter where we have it, counter, yep, counter 30 second, and then 30 second, yep, 30 second, that should be it. And let's give this one a try. Let's see what happened. Refresh the game. So I'm gonna go back and click start game, select right answer, yes, and select right answer, yes. And I'm going to select right answer again, and boom, boom, there you got a different random image, and so forth and so forth. I'm going to select wrong answer, I'm going to select wrong answer, and I'm going to select wrong answer, and there you go. And boom, the game is working. Now, the cool thing about this is even though it doesn't matter how long your question go. For example, if I had more question here, I could go here and give no matter how many question. And if I refresh this page and click start, get right answer, you can see here there's 7 more questions after this one, and that's the last question. And boom, ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, that should be the summary. And boom, there you go. I missed 7 questions. I got 3 right out of 10 questions, and believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the game. Now, to quickly review everything we've done so far, let's quickly kind of go over it one more time. What we're able to do is we load the question. As we're loading the question, we also loading the choices with the remaining of the question, which means whatever remaining of the question that we have, we also displaying them right here. So this function is the one that's responsible to do that. It's also responsible to start the timer as well. And after that, once the timer starts, which is this function here that start the timer, then it check and say, all right, whenever the timer reaches to 0, that's considered as time is up. And what happened when the time is up? When the time is up, we preload the image here with the lost count. We also increase the count of that user. We also display the next question after 3 seconds. We display the next question. All right, so what happened when we click on any one of them? Whenever we click on any choice that we select, we're first gonna clear the interval. We're gonna check and see whichever one the user pick and versus the correct answer. If the user win, we're gonna increment their score. load an image, and then display the next question 3 seconds after. And if the user lost, we're also going to increment their lost is and preload an image and also display the next question after that. And ladies and gentlemen, this is everything that we had for you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it thumbs up. If you don't like it too, please give it thumbs down. And don't forget to subscribe. See you guys in the next video.